Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing a book unhaul. So my last video was a very large book haul, so of course with that comes a book unhaul because I only have so much space for books in my house, so I'm trying to make space for all of those new shiny books that are coming in. So I'm gonna go through all the books that I unhaul. If you've never seen one of my unhauls before, I have a fantastic local used bookstore that takes in old books and gives you store credit for new ones. And that's usually how I get rid of all of my books. And if they don't take them, I will donate them to the library or to Goodwill. So let us go through all of these books. I have quite a few to share with you today. The first two I have are part of the same duology, and that is Sky Hunter and Steel Striker by Marie Lu. I really enjoyed Sky Hunter, even though it felt somewhat tropey. It's a YA fantasy / sci-fi. There were some cool dynamics that were introduced with the main character, and it got pretty dark in some parts, and I really enjoyed the ending, but unfortunately the direction that the second one took I just found to be very cliche, almost like very familiar, very like predictable, repetitive. I just wasn't enjoying it. I ended up DNFing it. So because I don't like the duology as a whole and DNF to the second one, I don't feel like I need to keep this around. It's gorgeous, gorgeous covers, gorgeous books. I love them. The look of them is just stunning. So hopefully someone will find these and absolutely love grabbing them and adding them to their own collection. I'm also going to part with Light Years from Home by Mike Chen. This was a sci-fi book that was released this year, and I would describe this as more contemporary with light sci-fi elements. It very much felt like it focused more on the family dynamics in this book rather than like the sci-fi elements, which I didn't mind. I actually really liked the family dynamics, but none of the characters were especially memorable or likable in any sort of way. I didn't find myself at the end really caring a whole lot for this family, so it just was one that I'm glad I read. I thought it was pretty good, but isn't going to stick with me in any sort of long-term way, and isn't going to be one that I reread in the future. And it's a gorgeous hardcover. Maybe someone else will pick it up and absolutely love it. I will also be unhauling Nine of Swords by Brooklyn Quintana. This was a book that was so kindly sent to me by the author, and I read this last year and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It's very long, and even though I really enjoyed it, it's one that I don't see myself rereading in the future, and I think is going to be a series, but there's no information on a sequel yet, so it's hard to keep this one around, especially when it takes up quite a lot of space. It's a big book. When I know that in order to continue on with the series, I would probably have to reread the first book, which I don't think I would want to do in order to continue on with this. So I'm gonna part with this one. I did really enjoy it. I still highly recommend checking it out. It was this really cozy fantasy story following a really likable group of characters. It just, isn't one that is an all-time favorite or anything like that. I am also parting with Eternals by Neil Gaiman, the comic book that I had read leading up to the release of the Eternals Marvel movie, and unfortunately I didn't like the movie a whole lot, and I didn't really like the comic book either. It was fine, but it wasn't one that I'm ever gonna reread or want to read like more of Eternals comics, so I just don't see why I would keep this one around. This one was tough. I'm being pretty picky with my collection now. This one was tough. I'm gonna part with Monstrous by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. So the art in this series is stunning. The most beautiful artwork that I've seen. Trying to find like a really good panel that represents it. Look how cool that is. How gorgeous. So the problem is the story itself is super confusing, and when I mentioned in my review of this that I felt very confused, it didn't really start clicking with me in this volume, what this is really about. I'm still pretty lost on the world. A lot of people said that that's how they felt volumes and volumes into this series, and honestly it's not something that I feel like I need to continue on with just because I really like the art. I didn't love the story, I didn't love the characters, and graphic novels are really expensive. So if I'm not loving them, I don't want to like keep spending a ton of money building up that collection unless I feel like I love it. So I'm gonna be parting with this, and it's beautiful. I highly recommend you check it out. I was just very confused by it. This was also really tough to get rid of. I did not think I would be getting rid of these, but alas, here we are. It is A Heart So Fierce and Broken and A Vow So Bold and Deadly by Bridget Kemmerer. So I have come to accept that if I don't love sequels in a series, I don't have to keep them. Like, I really like the first book, A Curse So Dark and Lonely. I loved that book. I thought it was so much fun, fantastic characters, just didn't take itself super seriously, but was like still really charming and engaging, and I loved the main character, and it was really good. And then I didn't really like the rest of the series. Like, it was fine, it was pretty good, but the first book was, in my opinion, far superior to the sequels. So I don't see myself ever rereading this trilogy as a whole, but I do see myself wanting to maybe pick up the first book again in the future. And I would love for like my kids in the future, when they grow up, to like read the first book. It's so much fun. That first book is so fun. So I don't feel like I have to keep the whole trilogy around. I kind of just want to keep the first book. So I'm going to get rid of these two, and maybe someone will see them and grab them and be super excited about it, which that'd be awesome. I'm also going to be parting with The Wife Between Us by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. I read this book a while ago, like a couple years ago, several years ago at this point. And to be honest, I've kept this around through a lot of unhauls because I don't remember a thing about it. And I thought, well, I could reread it because I literally don't remember anything about it. But then I was like, but why would I want to reread a book that I've already read and was that unmemorable when I could read like so many other thriller books that might be like all-time favorites? So I was like, I'm not gonna reread this one. I really am not, because I'm prioritizing other new books that I get really excited to read and that I think might be all-time favorites, you know? So this one I'm parting with. I'm also parting with Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. So this one I had picked up used, and I tried listening to the audiobook for it. And it's written in this way where it's almost like a script. So I thought the audiobook would be the way to go. Like, it would be such a good audiobook to listen to. Unfortunately, I did not like the audiobook. It was so confusing and so strange that like I just could not connect to the story at all. So this is just not gonna be for me, I don't think, and that's okay. I think that someone else might find this and get really excited, because it has a really cool concept where you're following like this novel about Lincoln's son passing, and he kind of has this whole story like beyond the grave, which sounded really awesome, but it just was not written in a way that I like to consume my stories, if that makes sense. I'm also unhauling Nightmare by Chad Nicholas. I had received this so kindly from the author, and I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it 3.5 stars. I thought this was pretty good, especially as like a debut. It was very creepy in some certain parts, but I don't see myself ever revisiting this one. It's not one that I think I would reread. The characters themselves, like, I didn't love, and some of the like dialogue came across as like not super believable in some parts, but I did like the twist at the end. Like, this one really stuck with me. I remember a lot of it, but I just don't feel like I have to keep it around, because I'm really trying to keep around books only if I know that in the future I would love to revisit those stories and pick them up again. So this is probably not one that I would reread, so I'm going to pass it on, but it was a really good one, so I highly recommend checking this one out. I had previously unhauled the whole Witcher series, but I kept around the short story collections, Last Wish and Sword of Destiny, because I really enjoyed the short story collections. I don't like the actual novels in the series, but I do like the short stories. However, with the new illustrated editions that are coming out from Orbit, I figured that these are not the cutest covers, I would say. I really don't like them at all, actually. So I'm definitely going to be picking up the illustrated editions, maybe asking for those for Christmas or my birthday in the future, and collect those instead, because I don't love these editions. So I'm super excited about those illustrated ones. They're beautiful. But yeah, don't feel like I have to keep these around. I'm also unhauling Where'd You Go, Bernadette by Maria Semple. This one is one that I read several years ago at this point, and I haven't even watched the movie. I don't really think I'd care to watch the movie. Honestly, the book itself wasn't very engaging. Like, it was cute, but it wasn't super memorable, and I don't see how it would be an interesting movie. Follows some characters looking for their mom, who's an explorer, off doing whatever, and it was fine, but I don't know how this has gone through so many unhauls. I don't know. I don't really have any answers for you. I'm not going to reread this one, and it wasn't my favorite. So, Where'd You Go, Bernadette? You're going to the bookstore. That's where you're going. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I read this one last year. I really liked it. I thought it had some very valuable lessons in it. A lot of it was like kind of obvious, but some of it was like very useful and valuable information. I don't think though that I'm going to reread it. I don't think I have to like keep it around to like tab it up in the future. It's just one that like, I'm glad I read it, but I don't see the need to like keep this in my collection for any reason. So I'm going to be parting with this. I am going to be parting with Hood and Scarlet by Stephen R. Lawhead. I read Hood last year. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really good. The sequel, though, is written from an entirely new character's perspective, and it felt very different from the first book, and I wasn't a huge fan of it. I ended up DNFing it. Again, it's kind of like similar to Sky Hunter and Steel Striker, where like I like the first book, but I think the difference between like something like this and the Cursebreaker series by Bridget Kemmerer is the first book in that series can read like a standalone, and this one really can't. Like, if the rest of the series isn't my favorite, then like the first book isn't my favorite anymore, like reflecting back on it. So yeah, I'm gonna part with these. I don't feel like I need to keep them around to like give them a second shot. There's so many other fantasy books that I'd love to read, so I don't want to, you know, spend time rereading one that I felt very lukewarm about in the first place, when I could be reading so many others. All right, I have 2 more that will be a part of this unhaul. That is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson, which I did end up DNFing. Just wasn't a huge fan of the story, and the characters felt very bland to me. I know that this one's really, really popular. I much prefer An Enchantment of Ravens. I found that one to be a lot cozier and sweeter, and I just liked that one. It was like a cozy little like fairy tale like story. But this one just, I didn't love it. It felt very familiar. It felt like a lot of other YA fantasy that I've read. So it was very blah. That's why I DNF'd it, and I don't feel the need to keep it around if I DNF'd it. And then finally we have The Stranger in the Mirror by Liv Constantine. This one I recently read because I loved The Last Mrs. Parrish, and this one was just not my favorite. It was 3 stars. It was fine while I was reading it, but I'm never gonna revisit it. Don't care to like reread it if I already know how it all plays out. Like, it's just one that I do not feel the need to keep around in my collection. Definitely keeping The Last Mrs. Parrish. That one is a favorite. But this one, it can go to a new home. I don't need to keep this anymore. So those are all the books that I'm unhauling, but I do have one additional book that I'm going to be giving away to one of you. So I had recently received The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah, the arc of it, from Orbit, and I actually just received a finished copy of it. So I no longer need 2 copies of it, so I figured I would give away the arc to one of you all who is interested in reading it. So if you'd like to receive an arc of The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah, just leave a little star in your comment and I will enter you, and in a week or so I will gather all the comments and put them through a random generator and select one of you to receive this book. So unfortunately, just due to shipping costs, this is only open to people who live in the US. I'm so sorry to international friends. There will be future giveaways where I will hopefully be able to include international friends, but this one for now is US only. So if you're interested, leave that little star. Very excited. So those are all of the books that I'm unhauling this go around. Did you see any that you have any thoughts on? Leave those comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye.